Rita Hayworth, the shining Hollywood starlet who was nicknamed the Love Goddess, is known for her iconic role as the femme fatale in Gilda. For years her beauty and allure was so memorable and influential that she inspired the creation of the sensual animated character Jessica Rabbit. Although Gilda is by far her most influential work, she appeared in other movies such as You Were Never Lovelier alongside Fred Astaire, CoverGirl next to Gene Kelly, and Down to Earth, where she played the goddess of dance, Terpsichore. Born Margarita Carmen Cancino on October 17, 1918 in Brooklyn, New York, she was the eldest of 3 children born to Eduardo Cancino Sr. and Valga Hayworth. From the very beginning, Margarita Carmen Cancino was groomed for dance and showbiz, with both her parents coming from strong ties to the world of dance and entertainment. Her father, Eduardo Cancino Sr., originally from Castilleja de la Cuesta, Spain, was a renowned dancer and dance instructor. He had immigrated to the United States and brought with him a rich tradition of Spanish dance. Valga Hayworth, Margarita's mother, was born in Washington, D.C., and was of Irish and English descent. She had a background in show business too, having performed with the very famous Ziegfeld Follies, which was a series of elaborate theatrical productions on Broadway. Growing up in such an environment, it can firmly be said young Margarita was groomed for show business and was something of a semi-nepo baby. Young Margarita was introduced to dance almost as soon as she could walk. Her father was very eager to pass on his skills and traditions to his daughter, and by the age of 3 she was already participating in rigorous dance lessons. In the early 1920s, the Cancino family moved to Los Angeles, hoping to capitalize on the burgeoning entertainment industry. By the age of 12, Margarita had become her father's dance partner in their family act, the Dancing Cancinos. To give her a more mature and Latin appearance, Margarita's father dyed her hair from brown to black, and from then on they performed in nightclubs and casinos, particularly in Tijuana, Mexico, where the prohibition laws did not apply, making the area a hot spot for American tourists seeking entertainment. These performances were grueling and often required her to balance schoolwork with late-night shows. According to her school principal, Margarita was one of the kindest, most motherly girls she ever knew, but a poor student. She did the best she could in school, but her best turned out to not be too good. It would be easy to simply call her a poor student, but Margarita had a very demanding father who did not give her enough time to concentrate on her schoolwork. Because she was working, Margarita never even graduated from high school. Her education only went as far as the 9th grade, which she completed at Hamilton High in Los Angeles. So, although she was a poor student, it was so very clear that it wasn't her fault but her father's, who forced her to be the family breadwinner as the main attraction of their dance team. Eduardo Cancino was outright horrible to his daughter, and did not allow her to have a normal childhood. According to a neighbor named Loretta Parkin, she and other kids would often peek into the Cancino's living room window to catch a glimpse of the mysterious Margarita practicing dance routines with her father. She and the other kids would witness Eduardo scream at the poor girl and holler at her, "Don't do that. Don't be so stupid," and they never heard her answer back at him, not ever. She would simply do the routine again until he was satisfied. Parkin felt awful for the shy little girl and said, "For Rita, there was no life, no school, no friends, no girlfriends. Just sitting, till it was time to go to Tijuana." However, being too demanding wasn't the only wrong Eduardo Cancino inflicted on his daughter. He was also a very violent man who drank heavily and gambled. According to the famed biographer Barbara Leeming, after Eduardo had drunk and gambled away their earnings, he would send her out to catch fish for dinner. If she returned empty-handed, he would punish her with his fists. But he was always scrupulously careful to not leave any marks for the audience to see as they performed. The most heartbreaking of Eduardo's treatment of Margarita, however, was that around this time he was also intimately abusing his daughter. Her mother, sadly, turned a blind eye to this abuse, making only feeble attempts to prevent it from happening, such as sleeping in the same bed as her daughter to try to protect her. But this was not enough. because Margarita often traveled alone with her father while her mother stayed at home watching her other two sons. This early childhood torment, dysfunction and abuse would scar her for life, and leave its fingerprints on all her future relationships. Despite this, Margarita demonstrated remarkable dedication and talent, quickly becoming a favorite among audiences. For many victims of child abuse, they continue to follow a pattern of abusive relationships that continues throughout their adult lives. Rita was no different. In the hope of escaping the control of her father at 18, she eloped with 43-year-old Eddie Judson, a shady former car salesman, who was an unreliable, untrustworthy, shifty conman who saw the enormous potential in her talent and used her for his own financial ends. Judson became her manager and orchestrated a transformation to make her more marketable in Hollywood. He suggested she change her name to Rita Hayworth, keeping only the last 4 letters of her first name and adopting her mother's maiden name to give her a more typical American appeal. He then had her dye her hair auburn, which was considered less Latin-looking and more glamorous than her natural dark brown. Additionally, she underwent painful electrolysis to raise her hairline and reshape her eyebrows, giving her a more refined appearance. With her new image, Rita began to gain more prominent roles. She signed a contract with Columbia Pictures in 1939, where studio head Harry Cohn saw her potential and began to groom her for stardom. Judson also encouraged Hayworth to sleep with influential men. Wells Orson, who would later become Rita's second husband, told Barbara Leeming, with clear disgust, that her first husband was a pimp. Literally a pimp. One day, Judson even planned for his wife to go on a yacht and sleep with the crude and rude Columbia studio boss Harry Cohn, who had just signed her. Hayworth refused to engage with Cohn in that way, but little did she know that her refusal would piss him off so badly that he would go out of his way to make her miserable for the next 2 decades. To get revenge, Cohn would treat Hayworth with shocking disrespect, using the bathroom in front of her and belittling her constantly. Despite this though, Harry Cohn was in the business of making money and he saw Rita's potential to earn him and Columbia Studios stacks of cash. So Rita would go on to appear in 5 minor Columbia pictures and 3 minor independent movies in 1937. The following year she appeared in 5 Columbia B movies. In 1939, Cohn was able to pressure director Howard Hawks into using Rita for a small but important role as a man-trap in the aviation drama Only Angels Have Wings, in which she played opposite Cary Grant and Jean Arthur. But it was only in 1940 that Harry Cohn began to really build up Rita in features such as Music in My Heart, The Lady in Question and Angels Over Broadway. That same year, while on loan to Warner Brothers, Rita appeared as the second female lead in The Strawberry Blonde, opposite James Cagney. The film was a success and Rita returned to Columbia Pictures in triumph and was cast in the musical You'll Never Get Rich in 1941, opposite the legendary Fred Astaire, in one of the highest budgeted films Columbia had ever made at the time. The movie was so successful the studio produced and released another Rita and Fred movie the following year, called You Were Never Lovelier. Her dance skills, which had been honed and polished since she was a child, were praised by Fred Astaire. However, even as her fame was on the rise, her marriage, which had been a train wreck from the very beginning, was shattering. Eddie Judson, although pivotal in launching her career and a shrewd businessman, was domineering and helped himself to the majority of all the money Rita earned. He compelled her to transfer a considerable amount of her property to him, and a promise to pay him $12,000 under threats that he would do her great bodily harm if she did not comply with his demands. By February 1942, Rita had finally had enough and she filed for divorce. In her divorce complaint, Rita cited cruelty and also said that Judson had failed to tell Rita before they married that he had previously been married twice. When Rita's divorce from Judson was finalized, she did not walk away unscathed. She was left with nothing. She was so broke when she finally left that she could not afford to feed herself and had to ask her friend Hermes Pan if she could eat at his house. This was a sad and shocking state of affairs. especially from a woman who had already become famous and worked with big-name celebrities. In that same year, Rita met Orson Welles, the man she would call the great love of her life. Orson Welles had been shooting in Brazil when he came across Rita's iconic pinup spread in the August 11th edition of Life magazine, where she's on her knees in bed. Once back in Hollywood, Welles found that the real Hayworth was miles away from her femme fatale, love goddess image. To draw the sweet, timid Rita out, Welles would pretend to read her mind, so she had to correct him. Rita relished having fun with Welles's friends from the Mercury Theatre, as she was finally able to connect with people her own age. The two became a couple, and by the next year in 1943, they got married during the shooting of the movie CoverGirl, in which Rita starred next to Gene Kelly. The movie CoverGirl was a success, but unfortunately for Rita, her new marriage was not. At first all seemed well with the newlyweds. They were happy and in love. The newlyweds settled in a Brentwood mansion. Together they plotted their escape from Hollywood, and attempted to launch Welles's political career, which according to biographer Barbara Leeming, was urged on by none other than President Roosevelt. Rita hated being a movie star. Welles would later lament. She never got a moment's pleasure out of being famous. It gave her nothing. Ready to start a new life and leave Hollywood behind for a more domestic existence, Rita worked hard to please her brilliant husband, reading the books he read and supporting the progressive causes he supported. All round, she really tried to be everything Orson Welles wanted of her. But the self-destructive, egocentric Welles soon began to pull away from Rita Hayworth. While she was pregnant with their daughter Rebecca, he began to canoodle with heiress Gloria Vanderbilt, who was herself married at the time. He also began to frequent professional women of the night, and then got entangled into a full-on passionate extramarital affair with the actress Judy Garland. Rita was naturally devastated by Orson Welles' many betrayals. She had simply wanted love and wanted to have a normal life away from Hollywood, but she continued a self-destructive pattern of looking for love in all the wrong places and people, essentially looking for a father figure who would protect her, take care of her, and give her stability. To be fair, Rita did enjoy many happy days with Orson, but in the end he didn't give her the time or attention she hoped for. As she struggled with her marriage, Rita eventually came to the realization that Orson Welles did not wish to be tied down. He showed no interest in establishing a home with her. When Rita suggested that they purchase a home, he told her he didn't want the responsibility. He would also tell her that he regretted marrying her in the first place, and that the marriage interfered with his freedom in his way of life. Rita must have no doubt been hurt by his words and felt incredibly lonely. Just like in her first marriage, it would be Rita who would rightly throw in the towel and file for divorce, even though it broke her heart. Shortly after she filed for divorce, she attended a star-studded Christmas party with fellow actress Shelley Winters. At the crowded party, Winters lost track of Rita for a time. Later, when she asked actress Ava Gardner if she had seen her, Ava pointed to a bed where Rita lay fast asleep beneath a pile of fur coats. She had been so lonely and bored that she dozed off, and Ava Gardner had draped the fur coats over her. When Shelley Winters came close to Rita to make sure she was all right, she could see that her hair and face were a mess. She'd been weeping and had broken down at the party. Although they would briefly reconcile during the filming of The Lady from Shanghai, Rita and Orson Welles' marriage was over by 1948, but the tiny silver lining was that their split was amicable. With her second marriage behind her and successful iconic films like Gilda, CoverGirl, and Down to Earth elevating her star status even higher, Rita decided to take a vacation to Europe. While there, she attended a charity ball at the Eiffel Tower, and nervously gave an endearing speech on behalf of poor children in French. It was at this event that she met and enthralled a royal, Prince Aly Khan. Prince Aly Khan was the son of Sultan Muhammad Shah, Aga Khan III, the head of the Ismaili Muslims in Asia and parts of Africa. Prince Aly Khan was something of a legendary Lothario in his circles, and the biographer Barbara Leeming described him as a Casanova, Sybarite, gentleman jockey, auto racer, hunter, pilot, horse breeder, soldier and Muslim religious leader. From the moment that this notorious playboy set his eyes on Rita at the charity ball, he wanted her, despite the fact that he was a married man. Determined to have her, he convinced famous hostess Elsa Maxwell to introduce him to Rita Hayworth. But Rita was not interested in him. She had finalized her divorce to Orson Welles that very year and probably just wanted some breathing space. But Aly Khan was not deterred by her clear reluctance to entertain his advances, and so he set out to woo her. During her European vacation, he pursued the reluctant star across the French Riviera, filling her suites with flowers and calling her hotels from his private plane. He even allegedly sent a fortune teller to tell the deeply superstitious actress to be with him. Eventually, Rita Hayworth was persuaded and started a relationship with Aly Khan. The charming prince was a way for her to leave Hollywood behind, and he also happened to be excellent in bed according to Barbara Leeming. Despite the fact that Rita, who was Catholic, was going to be a princess, the news of her being with a Muslim prince scandalized the staid post-war West, especially because he was very much still married to another woman. Everyone from the American Federation of Women's Clubs to the Vatican criticized Rita. Pope Pius XII even deemed their relationship illicit. After Aly Khan got a divorce from his wife, he married Rita the very next year in a very extravagant ceremony. Their wedding party in the valorous town hall consisted of 7 princes for princesses, a Maharaja, a Gekver and Emir, along with 30 journalists. Beside these, thousands of French citizens also lined the streets, eager to catch a glimpse of the new princess. After the wedding ceremony, an elaborate reception followed at the prince's magnificent chateau that overlooked the Mediterranean Sea. Nobody knew it at the time, but Rita was already carrying her second child, a beautiful baby girl the couple would name Yasmin Aga Khan. Like in her previous marriages, Rita did her best to try and mold herself into being what her man wanted. She took lessons in French, etiquette, royal protocol, and the mysteries of being a princess. Aly Khan and his family were heavily involved in horse racing, owning and racing horses. Rita Hayworth had no interest in the sport, but became a member of the Del Mar Thoroughbred Club anyway. At a point she even considered converting to Islam for her husband. Despite her best efforts, however, her life did not turn into some joyous fairy tale. Aly Khan, notorious and sociable playboy that he was, did not change his ways at all after marrying Rita and would eventually cheat on her with several women, including the actresses Joan Fontaine, Yvonne de Carlo and Jean Tierney, while Rita was reduced to simply being his occasional arm candy at exhausting rounds of society events. Far from having a quiet life away from Hollywood, Rita found herself trapped in a different but equally exhausting type of limelight. While dealing with the disappointments from her marriage with Aly Khan, she was targeted by jewel thieves, would-be kidnappers and paparazzi. Eventually, Rita began to lock herself in her room during Aly Khan's endless high society house parties, drinking and dancing alone to her Spanish record collection. She also became erratic and irrational during her frequent fights with Aly. In one incident, she declared that she was sick of life with Aly and wanted to go back to America. But the prince would just dismiss her feelings and calmly accuse her of having been drinking. Infuriated, Rita began throwing things at Aly, picture frames, books, and then after having dramatically summoned one of the household staff to fetch her a glass of orange juice, she flung the contents in Aly's face. Her marriage was a full-on dumpster fire, and Rita eventually decided to leave Aly. Terrified the prince would take custody of Princess Yasmin, in March 1951, Rita secretly spirited her daughters from Europe back to America. She then filed for divorce from Aly Khan on September 2, 1951, on the grounds of extreme mental cruelty. In January 1953, Hayworth was granted a divorce from Aly Khan. During the court proceedings, her daughter Yasmin, only 3 years old, famously played about the court while the case was being heard, finally climbing onto the judge's lap. After the collapse of her marriage to Khan, Rita Hayworth reluctantly returned to Hollywood to star in her comeback movie, Affair in Trinidad in 1952, which once again paired her with her Gilda co-star Glenn Ford. When she first received the script for Affair in Trinidad, she objected to it so strongly she threw the script across the room. Director Vincent Sherman recalled that Hayworth seemed rather frightened at the approach of doing another picture. Nevertheless, the picture was highly publicized. The picture ended up grossing $1 million more than her previous blockbuster, Gilda. Behind the scenes of Rita's movies, she continued to clash with Columbia boss Harry Cohn and was placed on suspension during the filming of An Affair in Trinidad. Harry Cohn continued to be a very nasty man to Rita throughout her years-long contract with Rita. He was very demanding and pushed the femme fatale image, which was not Rita's desire or style. He continued to make many inappropriate advances which she refused, and resulted in a tempestuous working relationship. He even bugged her movie trailers and office so he could secretly listen to her conversations, probably in an attempt to find something to blackmail her with. Years after her film career had ended and long after Cohn had died, Rita would still harbor deep resentment of her treatment by both him and Columbia. In 1968, she spoke bluntly about Harry Cohn in an interview, calling him a monster. After the movie An Affair in Trinidad, Rita continued to star in a string of successful movies, including Salome and Miss Sadie Thompson. However, her professional winning streak would temporarily come to an end after meeting and them marrying the big band singer Dick Haymes, whose Hollywood nickname was Mr. Evil. When Rita and Dick Haymes first met, he was still married and his singing career was waning. He was a deadbeat dad twice over. Haymes was desperate for money because two of his former wives were taking legal action against him for unpaid child support. His financial problems were so bad that when he tried to return to California, he was arrested, but Rita bailed him out and paid most of his debts. As Haymes was born in Argentina, he did not have solid proof of American citizenship. Not long after he met Rita Hayworth, immigration officials initiated proceedings to have him deported back to Argentina for being an illegal alien. He hoped Rita Hayworth could influence the government and keep him in the United States. When she assumed responsibility for his citizenship, a bond was formed that then led to marriage. The two were quickly married on September 24 of 1953. Still in a lot of debt, Rita tried to help Haymes by showing up at the clubs he performed in, which led to larger audiences because of her star power. This wasn't enough, however, to dig Haymes out of his financial hole, and at some point things became so bad, the couple was effectively imprisoned in a hotel room for 24 hours in Manhattan at the Hotel Madison while sheriff's deputies waited outside, threatening to arrest Haymes for outstanding debts. Throughout this tumultuous time, Haymes proved himself to be an abusive man who was only interested in using Rita for financial gain. Their marriage, which lasted only 2 short years, came to a head when Haymes struck Rita in the face in 1955 in public at the Coconut Grove nightclub in Los Angeles, leaving her with a black eye. Following that incident, Rita packed her bags, walked out, and never returned. Rita would later tell a friend that she could hardly believe that she could be a princess one minute and be treated like that the next. The assault and crisis shook her, and her doctor ordered her to remain in bed for several days. And to make matters worse, she was short of money after her marriage to Haymes, which added to her stress. Because of her marriage to Haymes, Rita was involved in much negative publicity, which significantly lessened her appeal. But she continued to work on movies such as Fire Down Below and her last musical Pal Joey in 1957 before finally leaving Columbia for good. Between her marriages and divorces, Rita got involved in a fair number of dalliances with men. But the woman they expected Rita Hayworth to be and what they got was quite different. In 1941, Rita Hayworth said she was the antithesis of the characters she played because she was naturally very shy and suffered from an inferiority complex. Her provocative role in Gilda in particular was responsible for people expecting her to be what she was not. Rita once famously said with some bitterness, "Men go to bed with Gilda but wake up with me." She said, "Basically, I am a good, gentle person, but I am attracted to mean personalities. She had affairs with several of her leading men, including with Victor Mature during the filming of My Gal Sal, Howard Hughes and Kirk Douglas. But these relationships never lasted long. Kirk Douglas, after their tryst, would then go on to say, according to Barbara Leeming, "I felt something deep within her I couldn't help, loneliness, sadness, something that would pull me down. I had to get away." Hayworth also had an intermittent long-term relationship with Glenn Ford, which started during the filming of Gilda in 1945, and continued through each other's numerous marriages. Their relationship is documented in the 2011 biography Glenn Ford, A Life by Ford's son, Peter Ford. Peter revealed in his book that Rita Hayworth became pregnant during the filming of The Loves of Carmen, and traveled to France to get an abortion. Ford later moved next door to her in Beverly Hills in 1960, and they continued their relationship until the early 1980s. Rita's fifth and final marriage was to film producer James Hill. They married on February 2, 1958, and their relationship began on a positive note. Hill was supportive of Rita's career, and they worked together on the set of Separate Tables, one of Rita's last major film roles. However, the pressures of Hollywood and Rita's personal struggles, including her battle with alcoholism, eventually led to the breakdown of their marriage. On September 1, 1961, Rita Hayworth filed for divorce, alleging extreme mental cruelty. Hill later wrote Rita Hayworth, a memoir in which he suggested that their marriage collapsed because he wanted Hayworth to continue making movies, while she wanted them both to retire from Hollywood. In his autobiography, Charles Heston wrote about Rita Hayworth's brief marriage to Hill, shedding more light on the couple's situation. One night, Heston and his wife Lydia joined the couple for dinner at a restaurant in Spain with the director George Marshall and the actor Rex Harrison, Rita's co-star in The Happy Thieves. Heston wrote that the occasion turned into the single most embarrassing evening of his life, describing how Hill heaped obscene abuse on Rita until she was reduced to a helpless flood of tears, her face buried in her hands. Heston wrote that the others sat stunned, witnesses to a marital massacre, and though he was strongly tempted to slug James Hill, he left with his wife Lydia after she stood up, almost in tears at what Rita had been put through. Heston wrote that he was ashamed of walking away from Rita's humiliation and would unfortunately never see her again afterward. As her personal life was dogged by turmoil, Rita's acting career sputtered. Periodic film roles did come her way, but they failed to capture the magic and star power her earlier work once had. In all, Hayworth appeared in more than 40 films, the last of which was the 1972 movie, The Wrath of God. In 1971, she briefly attempted a stage career, but it was quickly halted when it became apparent that Hayworth was unable to memorize her lines. Rita's diminished skills as an actress, which had been noticed on the set of The Wrath of God, were largely chalked up to what many believed was a severe alcohol problem. Her deteriorating state made headlines in January 1976 when the actress, appearing disheveled and out of sorts, was escorted off a plane. That same year, a California court, citing Rita Hayworth's alcohol issues, named an administrator for her affairs. Unbeknownst to everyone, alcohol was only one of the factors ruining her life. Rita was also suffering from Alzheimer's disease, which doctors diagnosed her as having 4 years later in 1980, which led to her being put in the care of her daughter Yasmin Aga Khan. She found comfort and acceptance not in a man, but in her daughter Princess Yasmin, who moved her to an adjoining apartment in New York. There Rita would often sit in an armchair, mutely staring into space, lovingly cared for by her daughter. In 1983, Rebecca Wells arranged to see her mother for the first time in 7 years. Speaking to his lifelong friend Roger Hill, Orson Welles expressed his concern about the visit's effect on his daughter. "Rita barely knows me now," Welles said. He recalled seeing Hayworth 3 years before at an event that the Reagans held for Frank Sinatra. "When it was over, I came over to her table, and I saw that she was very beautiful, very reposed looking, and didn't know me at first. After about 4 minutes of speaking, I could see that she realized who I was, and she began to cry quietly. Rita had once told him, "You know, the only happiness I've ever had in my life has been with you." Wells was overwhelmed with guilt about how badly he had treated her in their 5-year marriage, and with sadness at the perspective this gave him on her life, he would later say to biographer Barbara Leeming when speaking of their train wreck marriage, "If this was happiness, imagine what the rest of her life had been." In an interview that he gave the evening before his death in 1985, Wells called Hayworth one of the dearest and sweetest women that ever lived, and claimed to still love her. Hayworth lapsed into a semi-coma in February 1987. She died at age 68 from complications associated with Alzheimer's disease, on May 14, 1987, at her home in Manhattan. President Ronald Reagan, who was one of Hayworth's contemporaries in Hollywood, and who went on to also suffer from Alzheimer's in his final years, issued a statement that said, "Rita Hayworth was one of our country's most beloved stars. Glamorous and talented, she gave us many wonderful moments on stage and screen and delighted audiences from the time she was a young girl." In her later years, Rita became known for her struggle with Alzheimer's disease. Her courage and candor and that of her family were a great public service in bringing worldwide attention to a disease which we all hope will soon be cured. Nancy and I are saddened by Rita's death. She was a friend who we will miss. We extend our deep sympathy to her family. At her funeral, her pallbearers included actors Ricardo Montalban, Glenn Ford, Cesar Romero, Anthony Franciosa, choreographer Hermes Pan, and a family friend, Philip Luchenbull. Her headstone included Yasmin's heartfelt sentiment that read, "To yesterday's companionship and tomorrow's reunion." In one of the later chapters of Barbara Leeming's biography of Rita Hayworth, there was an incident when Rita was doing promotional work in South America. There was never a day when the press didn't stalk the woman. She was a prisoner to her own fame. During that time, she was also dealing with the onset of Alzheimer's disease, which had greatly diminished her memory and caused uncontrollable mood swings. Her PR team was naturally shocked and concerned about her well-being when they discovered her missing from her hotel suite. They looked for her frantically, afraid that something very bad might have happened. Eventually, they found her at a park flying kites with the local children. Rita Hayworth's life story tragically and ironically ran parallel to the moral of Orson Welles' masterpiece, Citizen Kane. Here was a woman in her mid to late 40s, fleeing the limelight to play with the children. He just wanted a carefree and simple life. She wanted to experience the innocence of a childhood she never had. Her life had contained both high and lows, glorious fame and glamour, as well as heartbreaking abuse and disappointments. Her talent, beauty, and charisma captivated audiences, and her performances in classic films like Gilda and CoverGirl left an indelible mark on the film industry. She may have died a very long time ago, but her legacy continues to inspire and enchant new generations of film lovers. Before ending this video, here are a few things you probably may not have known about Rita Hayworth. Fact number 1. Rita is a pin-up icon. During World War II, Rita Hayworth became one of the most popular pin-up girls for American soldiers. Her image was widely circulated, and she was considered a symbol of beauty and glamour. Fact number 2. Another thing Rita was famous for was her hair flip. Rita's iconic hair flip in the movie Gilda became one of the most memorable moments in film history. The scene where she tosses her hair back while singing "Put the Blame on Mame" is honestly quite legendary in film history. Fact number 3. Rita's influence extended beyond Hollywood. She inspired the creation of the character Jessica Rabbit in the animated film, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Jessica's sultry look and red hair were modeled after Rita's appearance in Gilda. Though many young people today might not recognize or know who Rita Hayworth is, the character Jessica Rabbit forever immortalized her in the ever-changing tastes and culture of the entertainment industry. Thanks for watching. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. Also check out the 2 videos I've put up on the screen if you enjoyed this one.